Was a life of opulent luxury truly worth the stench of burning flesh and the screams echoing through the streets? Did a man obsessed with divine law truly believe he could command the heavens? And could a woman forged in the fires of betrayal and prostitution ever find redemption in the gilded cage of an imperial court? The year was 532. Constantinople, a city pulsing with the chaotic energy of chariot races, the glint of gold, and the simmering resentment of two warring factions, the Blues and the Greens, was about to be consumed by a storm of unprecedented fury. It wasn't a storm of rain or wind, but of blood, fire, and the terrifying, visceral roar of a mob demanding a new emperor. The air hung thick with the scent of smoke, not from a pleasant hearth, but from buildings reduced to skeletal remains, monuments to a simmering discontent that had finally boiled over. Let's rewind. Imagine a world of silk and satin, of marble palaces and extravagant feasts. This was the reality for Justinian, the ambitious, relentlessly driven emperor who'd inherited a crumbling empire and a burning desire to restore it to its former glory. He wasn't a man easily swayed by sentiment, a ruthless pragmatist who saw the world in terms of power, order, and, of course, divine right. He'd spent years consolidating his authority, cleverly manipulating the city's factions, the Blues and the Greens, a dangerous game of chess played with human lives as the pieces. He'd even instituted a system of taxation so brutal, so relentlessly demanding, that the populace was practically begging for a change. And then there was Theodora. A name whispered in hushed tones, a legend shrouded in shadows. Her past was a brutal, unforgettable tapestry woven with threads of desperation, exploitation, and a surprising resilience. Born into a family of bear trainers who provided entertainment for the crowds between chariot races, a truly bizarre spectacle, she'd witnessed her father's untimely death and her mother's agonizing struggle to keep her 3 young daughters alive. The solution? A horrifying descent into the city's darkest corners. The girls were forced to perform as entertainers, a grim prelude to a life of prostitution, a desperate measure to stave off starvation. By the time Theodora reached puberty, she was already a seasoned veteran of the brothel trade, a survivor hardened by unimaginable cruelty. Procopius the chronicler paints a picture of her as a woman possessed by an insatiable hunger, capable of sleeping with upward of 40 men per night without satisfying her lust. But beneath the brutal assessment lies a chillingly astute observation. She was extremely clever and had a biting wit. She complied with the most outrageous demands without the slightest hesitation, and she was the sort of girl who, if somebody walloped her or boxed her ears, would make a jest of it and roar with laughter. It wasn't just about satisfying a physical need. It was about survival, about maintaining a fragile facade of control in a world that had stripped her of everything. Then a twist of fate, or perhaps divine intervention, intervened. A Roman official heading to North Africa to oversee a vast territory known as the Pentapolis took notice of her sharp intellect and undeniable allure. He whisked her away to his new post, a glittering, dangerous world of political intrigue and exotic landscapes. But even in this new environment, her past wouldn't let her go. He cast her aside, a discarded trinket, abandoning her to the harsh realities of the coastal road, a desperate scramble for survival. She found herself in Alexandria, a city steeped in theological conflict, a battleground between the established authority of Rome and Constantinople, and a burgeoning movement of Monophysite Christians who rejected the complex theological debates surrounding the nature of Christ. These Alexandrian Christians, feeling marginalized and misunderstood, clung to a simpler, more visceral faith, rejecting the precise, almost suffocating definitions imposed by the Chalcedonian Creed. They believed that Christ possessed 2 natures, human and divine, but feared the implications of a two-ness that threatened to unravel the very foundations of their faith. Enter Timothy III, the Bishop of Alexandria, a staunch defender of Monophysitism. He welcomed those fleeing persecution in Rome and Constantinople, offering them sanctuary within his city, and then, a remarkable turn of events. Theodora found herself drawn to Julian of Halicarnassos, a philosopher who argued that Christ's human body was incorruptible, suggesting that his incarnation was not merely a symbolic event but a real, tangible occurrence. She embraced Monophysitism, finding solace and a sense of belonging within this dissenting community. But her past was a shadow that followed her, a constant reminder of her origins. She abandoned her life of prostitution, seeking refuge with Macedonia, an actress who had discovered a more lucrative and less morally compromising path, the imperial secret police. Antioch, the third most important city in the Byzantine Empire, was a hotbed of espionage, a network of informants and spies dedicated to keeping Justinian informed of any potential threats. Macedonia, with her sharp wit and even sharper instincts, became one of Justinian's key operatives, reporting back to her boss through carefully crafted letters. And then, the impossible happened. Justinian, a man 20 years her senior, utterly smitten with her unconventional beauty and undeniable intelligence, offered her his hand in marriage. It was a scandal, a breach of protocol, a blatant disregard for the law, a law passed by Constantine 200 years earlier that forbade emperors from marrying actresses. But Justinian, driven by a passionate, almost obsessive desire, was determined to defy convention. His aunt Euphemia, Justinian's wife, predictably opposed the union, not out of concern for Theodora's past, but out of a deep-seated prejudice against anyone associated with the stage. But Euphemia's objections proved to be temporary. She died, and Justinian, emboldened by his grief and his unwavering conviction, swiftly enacted a law to overturn the ban, effectively legitimizing Theodora's status as an empress. The wedding ceremony took place in the magnificent Church of the Holy Wisdom, a testament to Justinian's ambition and his desire to elevate the empire to new heights. As he prepared to crown his co-emperor, Justinian made a bold declaration, a statement that would forever alter the relationship between the emperor and the law. What is greater or holier than the imperial majesty? He decreed that any interpretation of the law, whether made by the emperor himself through judicial proceedings or any other means, was to be considered valid and unquestionable. For if at the present time it is conceded only to the emperor to make laws, it should be befitting only the imperial power to interpret them. It was a claim of absolute authority, a declaration that the emperor was not merely the head of state but the ultimate arbiter of justice, the sole source of divine law. He saw himself as the heir of both Roman tradition and Christian faith, blending the authority of the ancient emperors with the moral guidance of Christ. But this assertion of divine authority was met with resistance, particularly from the remnants of the Platonic philosophical tradition. The Academy at Athens, the last bastion of classical learning, was forced to close its doors, its faculty fleeing to Persia, seeking refuge in a land where their ideas were not considered heretical. And then, the unthinkable happened. The city was plunged into chaos. A mob of disgruntled citizens, fueled by years of resentment and the brutal suppression of a previous uprising, erupted in a full-blown rebellion. The Nika revolt, named after the battle cry of the chariot racing factions, engulfed Constantinople in flames, threatening to tear the empire apart. Justinian and Theodora, trapped in the palace, faced annihilation. But Theodora, a woman forged in the crucible of hardship and betrayal, refused to surrender. Her words, delivered with unwavering conviction, galvanized Justinian and inspired his generals to launch a daring counterattack. Belisarius and the Illyricum army stormed the hippodrome, slaughtering thousands of rebels and crushing the uprising with ruthless efficiency. The aftermath was devastating. The city was scarred by fire, its infrastructure crippled, its population decimated. But Justinian, undeterred, embarked on a massive building program, determined to rebuild Constantinople into a symbol of his power and his faith. The Hagia Sophia, a breathtaking masterpiece of architecture and engineering, rose from the ashes of the old city, a testament to his ambition and his belief in the glory of God. As Justinian prepared to crown his son, Justin, he reflected on the events of the past few years. He had faced rebellion, plague, and war, yet he had emerged victorious, consolidating his power and reshaping the empire in his own image. But as he looked out over the city, he couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had shifted during his reign. His word had become law, not just in the secular realm, but in the realm of faith as well. He had dared to claim a divine mandate to establish himself as the sole interpreter of God's will on earth. And as the first tendrils of a devastating plague began to spread through the city, bringing with them death and despair, Justinian's ambition was tempered by a chilling realization that even the most powerful emperor is ultimately vulnerable to the forces of nature, to the relentless march of time, and to the unpredictable whims of fate. Was the price of power truly worth the constant fear of betrayal, the ever-present threat of rebellion, and the looming shadow of mortality? And could a legacy built on law and order truly withstand the onslaught of disease and despair?